Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to episode number 10, if I'm not mistaken, Chris, of Now
That's
It.
correct.
Yeah,
Episode 10. We're in the double digits now, folks. We've
right.
grown up.
Man, I
We
was
were
just having this conversation with my boss, and I'm like, I can't believe it's been more than a year of this podcast. Like we did start it somewhere around June, or at least the planning started in June. I don't know if
yeah,
maybe we kicked it off
yeah.
in August, but I'm pretty sure we did start back in June. So, happy anniversary, Chris.
Yeah, right. And I forgot to get you ballooning and some cupcakes or something.
I heard
Yeah,
it's
this is
China
this
for
has
the
been a
first year of
journey.
podcasting.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been quite a journey, and I think, I had some of the same sentiments as well. My family actually, and a lot of my family members listen to the podcast and really love the messaging, and it's kind of surreal to think about how we all of us kind of embrace self-advocacy, but guide each other through these different narratives and stories. So, I mean,
Right.
I'm really blessed to have, joined forces with you, Nasser, and also getting ready to kick off another episode here. Really excited. So it's been a journey, but one that's absolutely been worth the journey and worth the ride.
Absolutely. And honestly, I also had like an internal team meeting and I was talking about my podcast. And one of the things that came up was why did I start it? And I was just saying, honestly, I've always wanted to be able to help anyone. And if I can manage to just help someone throughout this entire journey, that is all I really care about. But then that also got me thinking that selfishly, I also have gained something out of this podcast, which is meeting people that I honestly don't think I've ever would have stepped out of my comfort zone to go introduce myself to or just hear about their
Hmm.
incredible journey. Which is a great segue into introducing our guest for today, which is Jacqlene Monét. Welcome to the podcast.
Hello, thank you so much for having me.
How are you doing
I
today?
am so excited for this. I'm geeking out over here only because Jacqueline and I have some history. We used to work together back at another company, a SaaS company, and so I've very much been looking forward to just catching up and also hearing your story, your strategy, your complete, voice that illuminates the room and really you be a transformation, Jacqueline. But I won't take the stage here. I want you to introduce our loyal listeners and everyone around the world who tunes in to Now at Night, who you are, and is also kind of what brought you to this podcast specifically as well.
So, what brought me to the podcast, of course, is Mr. Christopher Walker himself. When I saw the amazing things that he was doing on LinkedIn and just still staying tuned into his journey, post working together, like you said, at an IT SaaS company in New York, I just knew we have to reconnect. We have to talk. We have to talk about our journeys now, how things have gone since we last worked together. And this, he mentioned the podcast, and I thought this was a perfect fit. The alignment was there. And it just made sense to now talk about my journey as a full blown, full time entrepreneur stepping outside of the tech industry and leaving the 9 to 5 behind. So I know there's big gaps there, but we'll get there, I guess, into my story. But let me know, guys, where you want me to kind of, I guess, start with my journey or if there's any specific questions you had in mind.
Yeah, so I actually would love to take it from the start, let's say. I see that you went to school and got your Bachelor of Arts, and it was a double major in fashion design and merchandising.
Yes.
It's fascinating. I honestly was gonna study that when I was in high school. That was one of the phases I had. I was like, maybe I should study
Really?
design. Yeah, I honestly like I always have these conversations with people and they're like, how many majors were you trying to do? Because I was trying to
Multiple.
do three majors and I switched to nursing and then I was like, maybe I should become a vet. And then I was like, maybe I should do fashion design or Japanese literature. So I've been all over things. So take me
Incredible.
to the beginning. Out of after you finished college, how did you start your journey in tech and what made you decide that you basically want to step out of that and start your own thing?
Okay. Yes. Happy to do so. And it's so funny. I, like you, am you're not a queen, but I'm the queen of pivots, I must say. I pivoted so much in life. Going into college, I actually wanted to be a dentist. So I totally understand what you mean.
Oh wow.
And right. So switching from a bio major, real quick rude awakening, like this is not where I'm meant to be. This is not where my passion lies. And completely transforming and shifting into the life of being a custom fashion designer. That was me. That's what everyone back home knew me for. Probably for the decade before tech, to be honest. I was doing a lot of custom work for folks that go into fashion shows, awards, you name it, and had my own fashion shows as well as did a huge bow tie line that was like really successful at some point. And so I got to this point where, okay, we're gonna be real here, right? I was about to turn 26 and I was on my parents' medical insurance, and they said, you need to figure something out. Get your own medical insurance. We support you. We love that you're a fashion designer, but fashion design doesn't typically come with medical insurance. So I had to figure something out. And I was looking for a job, and none of the fashion houses that I knew were hiring at the time. And so a really good friend of mine when I was in California suggested, why don't you try a headhunter, an agency to try to find a job? I said, okay. So I was trying to find something kind of low hanging fruit that would provide some easy hours and so I can still fulfill my dream of being a designer at the same time, but had medical benefits. But lo and behold, I had no idea that my first experience with this headhunter agency would be me sending a virtual resume to a tech company. It was a new emerging social media platform that was based in Santa Monica at the time, and they were looking for content moderators to come in and join the company. And so I went to the interview, they accepted my resume, and I hit it off with the hiring manager immediately, who is now one of my mentors to this day, which is really awesome.
Oh.
So that was probably back in 2012, 13. I would say, no, 13, 14, around that time. And she immediately, while we were in the interview, said, can you start today? So that was pretty much my random segue into the tech industry. And so I started as a content moderator, which was a very intense job. I must say you had to pretty much have Urban Dictionary on standby and look up all the bad words you can think of on the app and delete 8 to 10,000 posts a day. So I've seen it all. I've read it all. Experienced it all. I definitely paid my dues in the tech industry. Okay, so that was that was no easy feat. But once we shifted, they did a kind of a restructuring and moved us from the Culver City office all into the Venice Beach office, which was incredible, right under the Venice Beach sign in Angelica Houston's house. So it was really, really awesome being in there, the full Southern California experience. Like I'm born and raised in Southern California, but I had never experienced kind of working right on the beach, surfboards in the office, the whole nine. And it was awesome. And it was such a great experience because once I moved into the headquarters, I started having lunch with some of the engineers and I started getting to know folks on the product team and different organizations in the tech industry that I just wasn't aware of that existed at the time. And so they would tell me about what their role and what they did and let me know about free classes I can take. And I fully immersed myself into the tech industry and fell in love. I'm like, why did I not minor in this in school? If I would have known sooner, I would have. And so I had the full fun tech experience with the chef and all the perks and all that. And it was awesome. But in the back of my mind, I always wanted to move to New York City. Always, always, always. It was a dream. And so I wanted to move and take those efforts of being in the tech industry, but also transferring it over to New York. And so luckily at the time, I worked my way up the company, moved into the technical support space, became the department head for that team, and then worked out in finance. I kind of, not finance, finessed an opportunity to work remotely, which wasn't a thing back then. Work remotely in New York they gave me 5 weeks to find a new job. So my boss was amazing at that time to kind of help me work that out. And so I was doing my thing, trying to find a job. I actually was living in Boston first, and I was busing back and forth between Boston and New York, trying to find a job, trying to find an apartment in Brooklyn, staying on friends' couches, and really just trying to make my way into New York City. And so lo and behold, that is how I landed and found, I can't say the name, I guess, the IT SaaS company that Chris Walker and I used to work for. And the way that I found that, it was actually interesting as well. I was trying to find roommates, trying to find a place, and was introduced to someone, I believe, via email or LinkedIn. And they're saying, hey, we know New York is hard, so we're going to help you figure something out. And I met someone who knew a guy that was one of the managers at the SaaS company and was looking for someone. And they pretty much we exchanged emails and they said, come in for an interview. And that's when I met the CEO and had a very, I would say, intimidating meeting where he's like, "You're in fashion design. That's sexy. We're not sexy." I'm like, "Wait a minute. Hey, wait a minute. Tech can be sexy. I belong here." And so that really showed me what I was made of. And that IT SaaS company stretched me even further into the technical realm of where I was considering, do I want to be an engineer? What do I want to, major or not major, but what certs and things I want to do to level up my career. And so I would say thanks to that company in New York, it expanded me leaps and bounds even further to then further my career into leaps and bounds in places I never imagined. So I'm sorry, I know I've been kind of rambling a little bit here, but I didn't know if I should go deeper into that or if you guys want to shift a little bit there.
No, that sounds incredible. Thank you for sharing your journey. I guess my question is, how do you, or what advice would you give someone who was in, I want to say, a field that is not so in touch with tech? In your case, that was fashion design. And what would you say, or what advice would you give them to switch that field and kind of use the skills that they've gathered from their field into tech world? Because I can imagine, even though fashion design, I believe, is honestly very much interconnected with tech, because there are a lot of different aspects that you would think are not connected. But I would imagine, honestly, to produce a piece of fashion, you go through different steps that might have different terminologies that could align very much to the tech world and how we can come out with a product or how we can sell a product or etc. Right? So, what kind of skills or what kind of advice would you give someone who is trying to shift their kind of field and kind of finesse away into their tech journey?
Great question. I get this question so much, especially people back home. They're like, "How did you make that switch?" That's a complete 180.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And I would say, the network, go to a networking event, go to mixers, meet different people in different fields. Or, if you just know people in your life that are in the tech industry or not, you just meet some people, ask them, "Hey, what do you do on a day to day basis?" Some of my best mentors and leaders actually made me reach out to random folks on LinkedIn and say, "Hey, can I put time in your calendar to talk to you about your role and like what you do so I can learn more about this?" It's a lot about, it's a lot of getting uncomfortable, meeting certain people, and just expanding your mind and your world. Because once you're in the tech industry, it kind of unlocks this door in your mind that you had no idea this track this career track existed. I know it's a lot more popular as now, but back when I was trying to get my foot in the door at 2012, 2013, it wasn't as popular. But I like to tell when I talk to I go to schools and I talk to young folks, I go to universities and talk to them and they ask me this question and I say, take a second to think about all the apps that you have on your phone. Somebody has to work there. Somebody has to work for it. Someone has to keep the lights on. Someone has to sell it. Someone has to make sure the UI looks good. Someone has to, make sure that if there's an outage or a bug, it needs to get fixed. So I think when I start to explain things like that, it opens up folks' minds. And I would say put yourself out there and, you never know when you might fall in love with something like this because I didn't see it coming. Once I started taking certifications that were kind of related to certain fields and getting my foot wet and getting myself into the industry, then I was like, oh man, this is where I'm meant to be. I love tech. It's awesome. And you fully immerse yourself in it. But I would say get uncomfortable, try new things, reach out, ask folks about their role that are in the industry already. So you can get an idea of maybe where your place might be. And when you start, that doesn't mean that's the position you're going to hold the entire time. Please know I pivoted a lot while I was in the industry because you learn and you grow over time. The more certifications you take, the more people you meet, different lunches you have with folks, you might expand and your skill set will expand too. So that's probably the best advice I can give to folks that are trying to find their way in because it can seem a little difficult to figure it out. But again, think about all the apps that are on your phone and look up the jobs and the careers that are possible and find your footing in. One last thing I'll say is customer support is always a really good way to get in. Customer, support, the technical support side, the folks that are trying to really help folks on the inside of the app learn the inner workings of the app and how it works and how to fix things and push things off to engineering and product. That's a really good way in because there's a lot of great entry level positions that pay really well.
Absolutely. And that also kind of leads me to a question I had in mind when I was looking at your resume. is you did mention that networking and basically going out to people and just asking them straight up, hey, I want to meet with you. I want to get to know more about what you do and all of that, right? But one of the things that I personally struggled with, especially when I was in college or even before that, is I want to say the ability to approach people because it's an intimidating ask. It's going definitely out of a lot of our comfort zones, and it does involve basically the ability that you are kind of technically publicly speaking to those people, even if you're not really
Mhm.
not really have an audience, but it's just the idea of that. Hey, I'm gonna speak to someone that I've never spoken to before, and we all know that like your first impression carries a lot. So what kind of advice would you give someone who is also struggling with that aspect, which is getting out of their comfort zone and reaching out to people, or just the ability, if they have reached out to people, how do they carry themselves when they're having these conversations with people?
Great question. So I would say, and it's funny, I have a strategic mindset. So for me, I like to prepare ahead, right? Preparation is key. Write down some key questions that you can start off with that are really low hanging fruit and really easy. I mean, hey, ChatGPT is your friend also. So you can literally ask ChatGPT what to say. And I know there's a couple aspects here of what type of networking, right? Like there's DMing someone on LinkedIn, which might seem a little less stressful. It's still nerve wracking. Don't get me wrong, but it's less stressful than you actually standing in a room and having to walk over and walk up to someone and introduce yourself, right? So
Mhm.
I like to prepare some questions ahead of time so that I can just pull them out of my pocket whenever I need it. Let's also just face it, a lot of people like to talk about themselves.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So if you just ask, hey, how long have you been in this industry? Hey, what brought you to this event? Where are you from? How long have you been in this industry? Those kind of easy questions to kind of just start the ball rolling and then build from there. There can also be some awkward moments when you're networking because the other person doesn't know you. You don't know what their personality is going to be like, and you can't control how they react. But
Mm.
all you can do is kind of, and I know this is this might not be the place, but I lead with love. That's just what it is. I bring good energy. I come
Absolutely.
in with the right. You lead with the energy that you want to receive. You send that out. So you make sure you're coming with a light, positive voice. You're having a smile on your face if you're in person. You're leaning in with a strong handshake. You're giving eye contact, looking confident. A lot of that goes a long way. Body language is so key, especially when you're
Yeah.
networking in person. It's what really how you present yourself. So if you need to do this in front of a mirror and have mirror talk before you go to prepare, that's okay too. No one's there to see you, right? Or if you want to practice with a friend or someone in your house, that always helps. But preparing and preparation is key so that you can really feel like you're in the driver's seat when you're meeting folks because it can feel I know I've been networking for years, but I still sometimes get the little butterflies and I'm nervous.
Yeah, for sure.
Right when I'm about to meet someone, but preparing ahead of time always helps me feel more confident when I'm putting myself out there and getting uncomfortable.
Absolutely. And you know what? I also was telling this to someone very recently is we are all eager to tell our stories, right? We all want someone to tell us, hey, what's your story? What are you passionate about? How did you get here? So when you really think about that and how everyone is basically kind of the same, honestly, that made me feel better about approaching people and just asking them, and even starting this podcast, like getting on this call and basically asking you, how did you start your journey? Or when I reached out to Chris and said, hey, Chris, do you want to start this podcast together? That all
That's
was,
literally how that happened.
yeah, I'm out of my comfort zone. I'm going to tell people,
Yeah.
tell me your story, and maybe we can learn from each other. Because at the end of the day, despite what we all might think, we all have so much more in common than we think.
Yeah,
Yes. I
really
think
good
that
point.
speaks to a lot about how we empower others, right? To your point, Naser and Jacqueline, kind of copy and pasting that love plug, right? Because it is all about leading with love, with empathy. But as we empower each other through these different stories, I think it's really vital that we're not siloing those voices because I think what inspires me are the conversations like this, right? How do we go from fear to freedom and stepping into our own brand and how we empower that brand and lead with that love, but also leave a legacy behind. And that was one of the questions I wanted to actually ask you, Jacqueline. Something that has inspired me is your brand mission and your statement around how you founded JM Legacy and what inspired you to actually, because that's a lot of people I talk to. It's like, how do I even maybe start my own thing? Maybe there isn't a space for me in the industry. So maybe I want to start my own thing, be the CEO of whatever that is. And so I'm curious what was the inspiration behind Jam Legacy Group, and also what legacy do you hope to leave behind?
Ooh, great question. Love that. So it was a long time coming, honestly. I've been lucky enough to figure out what my purpose was back when I was living in New York. I'm based in Atlanta, Georgia now, but I figured out my purpose, and I knew my purpose on earth was to impact the world by sharing my experiences and helping folks figure out a roadmap that might not exist. Because I always wish that there was someone there for me when I was trying to figure out my road when I was pivoting. And so I know that is why I'm on this earth. The other thing is, for some reason, I'm always put in a position to speak publicly at every job that I've ever held. So I just kind of knew that that was a major skill set of mine, and also, I would tap into my mentors and leaders and people around me that when I would ask them, when you think of me, what do you see? Or what are some skills that you think I'm really great at? And they helped me realize also that I'm pretty much an expert at strategy and gap analysis. And so taking my experiences from the tech industry was a no brainer, and knowing that I needed to, share the wealth of what my decade in tech was like with folks who might be looking to figure out what this path is that look like me, right? And there's also a lot of aspects of creating community and creating representation within the Black community as well in this space, because there's not a lot of folks that look like me. And so I actually quit my job last year full out because I was experiencing some harassment from leadership. And I just knew that I was like, okay, I think God is yelling at me loud and clear that it's just been time to leave, because I'm just not truly living in my purpose completely. I was helping some folks through mentorship at my job, but I knew I needed to impact the world on a larger scale. And
Mm.
I always knew that I really enjoyed speaking, and it's something that came natural to me. And
Nice.
so TED Talk has definitely always been on my radar. That is a huge goal of mine, and I actually signed up for this amazing community called Next Level Speakers, and it helped me figure out a way to not figure out, but it taught me how to turn my speaking into a full blown business. And so I took
Nice.
the course,
I love that.
passed the course, and really just kind of same way, right? Like started up, became an expert in the speaking space, and found a way to launch my business. And so Jam Legacy Group was born. I really just want to leave my legacy on this world by impacting everyone and making authentic, true changes in folks' lives, like helping people land that presentation that they got looked over for, or helping people figure out a roadmap and steps and how to organize steps towards taking action towards their goals and actually achieving them, or
Mm.
eventually creating a nonprofit under the umbrella of J Legacy Group and sending someone to college or paying someone's rent off or buying groceries for people, right? Like my goal is to create and gain enough access to truly impact and change lives on a large scale. And so self advocacy has also been that key of really just speaking up for folks in this industry. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention, I also am a fibromyalgia warrior. So I do speak about chronic illness and navigating
Yes.
that while working in the tech space as well. So self advocacy definitely rings true. And legacy just became that word that kind of was a streamlined theme through it all.
Hmm. That's honestly fascinating. But I also
Absolutely.
wanted
Thank
to
you.
ask you more if you're comfortable about speaking
Yeah.
about being a person of color working in corporate America, and also I want to say the diversity and inclusion of all of that, right? So a lot of time, this is a very hard thing for a lot of people to basically break into the tech world being a person of color, number one, and also not being taken seriously in a lot of different areas just based on where you come from or what you refer to. I mean, that is something I personally have struggled with in the past. So, can you speak more about that, and how can you basically, I don't want to say demand a place in where you're at, but it's more like, hey, I am here and this is who I am, and I'm going to represent myself, and not only represent myself, but I'm only going to represent my people as well.
Yes. Oh, I'd love to. Always love to speak about this. First, I got to say, it's kind of, deflating and disheartening how the current state of events in the world are kind of ripping that out of the organizations that work so hard to put it in. But while it was booming, I would say the DE&I spectrum and everything that was in between, I must say I was very blessed to have the opportunity to have a great relationship at the IT SaaS company CEO. I'm sorry, great relationship with the CEO at the IT SaaS company that Chris Walker and I worked with to be able to use my voice, right, to create the first employee resource group in general, but the first one for Black employees as well, to really just bring our voice loud and clear to show the discrepancies and the lack of Black representation in leadership and empowerment and just throughout the company, throughout different, I would say, departments throughout the organization. It
Nice.
was nerve wracking at the time because there was a lot hanging on this, and the height. It started before 2020, but of course, the height of it was during 2020.
Mhm.
But luckily, I have to shout out my parents because they always raised me to be someone that is kind of loud and proud of my heritage and where I come from and my history. And so it would kind of just felt like a natural streamline to emphasize this at work. I was the first Black woman hired at that tech company. And so luckily, I used that to a good advantage, right? To bring voices to the industry, to bring our voices and make them loud. And so there was people also who told me flat out if they didn't see me in the interview process, they would not have taken the job offer because they just didn't know if our community was represented. But once they saw me, they said, "Oh, I have to work here," which was so humbling and so
Love that.
incredibly empowering, right?
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
just hearing feedback like that from folks lit a fire in me, and I said, "Okay, I knew this is part of my purpose too. I need to bring our voice loud and clear." And it also taught me a lot because I'm grateful that CEO at the time took time to sit down with me. A lot of folks in the C-suite actually took time to sit down and talk strategy, where I learned numbers, where I was able to bring stats and information of, the discrepancies of the community within the company to make change and to increase the numbers and actually be mindful and strategic about the moves we were making, not just being loud and making noise, right? But like actually taking things and putting into action. And I would say one of the best achievements, I actually just posted about it. One of the best achievements I remember was being able to negotiate a half day off for Juneteenth for the company for the first time. That was amazing. Being able to be in a position to create something like that with action and make it happen and educate the company at the same time. And so I've carried that with me through all of my tech companies, right? I've either created, founded, or co-chaired or chaired the ERG groups that I could for the Black community, for the women's groups. And so I really am just really strong to help folks find their voice, even if it isn't for the Black community. I also know, there's just differences in culture. For example, one of my mentees is from India, an Indian woman, and she would find it hard to use her voice because of how she was raised to be more submissive, right? And so
Mhm.
I really spent a lot of time with her saying, "You have a strong mind. You are a beast in this industry. People need to know who you are and what you can provide." And her knowledge and her strength and her smarts were just, kind of dormant because she wasn't using her voice. And in the end, we helped get her multiple promotions after she found her voice, right? And so it takes time, it takes effort, but I think if more folks see people like me leading the charge, they feel more inclined to feel confident to say something and speak up. And I think the times that I have self-advocated, I have spoken up, excuse me, and became a voice for myself and my community, it's propelled my career even further and helped me pivot. So
No.
it was hard to navigate at times and it was nerve-wracking. And there were times I got attacked by folks. I'm not gonna lie, where it beat me down. But you have to have folks in your village to surround you to lift you up and keep you motivated and supported so that you can continue to carry that out. And I know that's not for everybody to do because it can be, like you say, heavy is the head that wears the crown, right? It can be quite difficult and trying at times, but the rewards are definitely much more, I would say, fulfilling and satisfying versus the latter, right? I just think if I stopped using my voice, there's a lot of people out there that I probably wouldn't have impacted and touched the way that I did, especially during my decade in the tech industry. And so I'm grateful that I created relationships to be able to propel myself and my community forward.
I love that. And
Thank you.
yeah, and one more thing I also wanted to talk about, which I feel like also ties a lot to this, is imposter syndrome. I saw that one of the topics that you emphasize on,
Yes.
speak about, is imposter syndrome. And I can't even tell you, I literally wake up every day and I'm like, okay, today is the day they're gonna find out I am a fraud. Like, oh, you're out. So can you speak more about what imposter syndrome is and how to overcome something like that? Because I bet you a lot of money that I want to say maybe 95% of people have that, or they're struggling of some sort of imposter syndrome for sure.
Yeah, look at you. You did your research, huh? What about website? Oh, it's actually a really it's I guess I would say a little less popular, but it was very popularized at some time, and I think it still is really important. So I think imposter syndrome takes a lot of soul work, as they like to say. And one of my mentors, Eric Thomas, he talks about that a lot. I don't know if you guys know him as a speaker. He's probably one of the top 5 speakers in the world, and he talks about doing the soul work a lot, and kind of really looking inward and having some introspective of who you are, what your worth is, understanding what worth is, and really figuring out your skill set. Like, what are you uniquely skilled at? Forget everybody else in the world, remove the comparison factors, silence all the noise, and think about you. What have you done over the years? What have you brought to the table? What have you achieved in your life? And take record of that, right? Maybe you need to do a brain dump and write that down to really sit and think that through. But I think, imposter syndrome always shows up no matter what. I don't care who you are. You can lie if you want to, but it always shows up, even for me, right? Even if I've done all the preparation and I'm about to hit the stage with the mic and I have a crowd in front of me, imposter syndrome's like, hey, girl, I'm here. And I have to silence it, right? And tell it to get out of here. You're not welcome. And so I think taking account of the things that you've achieved or the goals that you might want to hit or the things that you are so completely passionate about in your life that no one can take away from you, I think that helps you break through your imposter syndrome, right? But really sitting and thinking, okay, my title isn't what's important here. What's in the bank account is not what's important here. It's really about what I uniquely bring to the table that no one else can take away from me. Like you said, is part of my story, right? That no one else can mimic, no one else can duplicate. It's all specifically within you. But I think it takes some time to really sit and have some introspective and really focus on what you can bring to the table. Right? Because I think sometimes people don't like to pause and just do that, but it takes work, it takes time. But I think just speaking life into yourself, honestly, having other folks speak life into you too, reminding you who you are, right? Because sometimes we forget, sometimes we have the blues, sometimes we have a bad day, but having a village around you also to lift you up is also major key. But it starts within you first.
Absolutely. And I honestly couldn't have said it better. One of the things I kind of learned during therapy was to give names to things that come up in my head and talk to them individually, right? So I have, I think, one of the worst cases of hypochondria I can ever hear about. I grew up with a family of doctors. So growing up, I literally would go into my father's library and read about the disease and be very convinced that I had that, right? So,
oh no.
Yeah. I recently was sharing that with my therapist, and he was like, what would you call it? Right? Like, give it a name. And then he was like, how would you talk to that individual? And what would you say to it? Right? And then later in another meeting that I had, someone was also talking about not listening to yourself sometimes, even though it sounds like a terrible advice, but hear me out here. Sometimes we can be really tough on ourselves. We can be very unkind to ourselves, even if we are generally a kind individual. I'd like to think that I am at least. But we tend to be very aggressive when we're talking to ourselves, and we always tend to talk ourselves down. So changing that narrative and kind of being kind to ourselves first before we're kind to others would definitely kind of get us over these, I want to say, syndromes, whether that was imposter, whether that was just, in my case, I'm also a shy individual, so I don't really like tend to speak up in major events or when there are a lot of people. So it's one of the things I really try to kind of step out of my comfort zone and be louder and make myself heard.
I love that. Yes, you brought up so many good points there. That you're right. A lot of times our self-talk is so negative. We beat ourselves up so much internally in our subconscious or just the things we say to ourselves. And I through therapy like you and through especially cognitive behavioral therapy,
Oh yeah.
I've been doing a lot of work of switching my self-talk into being more positive, grateful, leading with gratitude,
Mhm.
and just really step into that space. Because especially with fibromyalgia, I'm in pain daily, right? And so
Oh,
my mental health is really important in those stages, and especially when you tie it into my career, my business, running a business, being an entrepreneur. The
Absolutely.
mental health capacity there and imposter syndrome shows up all the time. So you are absolutely right with shifting your self talk into being more positive.
love
I
that.
love that. I think to that point too, right? Those vulnerabilities become your authenticity, and right, it changes the narrative. It's a cultural shift. So for me, when I think about things that are going on in my life, and to your point, Jacqueline, right? You've got things going on, whether they're physical pains or if they're emotional or mental. Like there are a lot of different streams we're trying to systematically approach, and also not being hard on ourselves, right? Now, so you're saying like self doubt, right? Being so hard on ourselves to the point where it's like, am I being so mean to this person that's just trying to express, right? And feel like they have empowerment over themselves and also being able to inspire other people. So I think from what I'm hearing, I'm loving just not just the narrative, but how you both inspire me and empower that story through this narrative and through this podcast. Because through those affirmations, I think that's what helps us kind of generate our own self therapy. Like we are worthy, we are loved, we can do a lot of beautiful, great things together. But we also have a lot of individual traits and things that we can share. Even if we're scared, sometimes I'm scared too. And when I share it, I find out someone likes what I like. Like,
Yeah.
I like playing video games. Oh, you too? What games? And it's simple things like that that kind of help
Yeah.
us reprogram that mindset from a negative mindset to now a positive, reinforced, and rehabilitated, person that just wants to express who they truly are and who they identify as. So I love everything I'm hearing. I just wanted to voice that and just appreciate again just how much this story has unfolded and where I believe will continue to go and grow too. So really appreciate it.
If I may, Chris, you actually made me think of my first form of therapy in college, actually, was the group therapy. And I'm so grateful that I had that experience. And I
Yeah.
recommend it to so many people because it kind of hits the nail on the head, like what you just said. Once you meet like minded individuals and folks that are, experiencing very similar things as you, it kind of takes you outside of yourself and say, hey, I'm making all this up about me in my head, and it's not all about me, and I'm not the only one in this world dealing with this. But there's also a lot of people who can
Right.
relate. And it just, like you said, it creates that level of empathy and sympathy, right, for others and yourself and ourselves because we're so hard on ourselves. And I think that is very important to not isolate and just be in your own bubble, but be a bit. I know a lot of people's level of threshold for vulnerability is different, but even if you can just be a little bit vulnerable
Yeah.
and share some of that with someone else, it goes a long
Absolutely. And
Absolutely.
I just want to close that out with one thing. I was listening to a podcast with Michael Esser. I don't know if you guys are familiar, but he advocates about doing hard things in order for us to live an easier life, right? So he advocates for challenging ourselves every day to do something that we think is very hard, that we might even not be able to finish, because the reward system after that on your brain is really would basically make you perform better in the long run, right? And one of the things he was mentioning is that one of the hard things that he likes to do, I believe he is not a recovering alcoholic, but he just likes to go to AA meetings and hear different stories. I could be wrong. He might be just going to AA meetings in general, but that
way.
really got me thinking about finding these kind of different meetings, right? So there are a lot of different resources in our communities that you can be part of, even if you don't belong to that specific group in general. Sometimes just going to these events and hearing people share their stories and just connecting to people on a personal level really brings you back to the idea of, by the way, all of those people around us are all human beings. All of us have our own, I want to say, battles that we're fighting on day-to-day basis, whether that was an actual disease or something like, I don't know, something that you personally struggle with, like a mental disorder or something like that. So just relating to others and just making sure that, hey, all of us, we are human beings who are fighting each other, goes back to the idea that where we started, which is leading with kindness and leading with, we're all human beings and let's treat each other as such.
Yes. Yes, that's such a good point. And I think ironically that was catalyst of what made me want to start my business and launch my business last year because I was probably at one of my toughest times in life from a health perspective, a grief perspective. I lost my grandma and the toughest time I had in leadership in the tech industry. And so all those things compounded really just made me have to take a moment outside of myself. I took my first sabbatical. I did a bunch of sound baths. I went to therapy. I see counseling from my pastor. I did a lot of things to kind of recenter myself and really just figure out how to take my steps forward. And it wasn't until I kind of received a lot of signs and I was open to receiving them, thankfully, that was guiding me towards, all right, it's time to create your legacy and it's time to create JM Legacy, right? And help impact the world. And I think once you have those moments of introspection, you never know the types of clarity that will come ringing through so strong. And I think that was kind of my personal experience with creating my business, stepping out on faith, doing the hard things, like you said, of leaving the tech industry and betting on myself because I knew it was what I was meant to do and what I'm meant to be in this world. And I don't regret the decision at all. And it was probably the best decision I ever made. And so I would encourage anyone out there who is looking to kind of step out and make a leap and take a bet on themselves to, yes, of course, plan accordingly, be strategic, and try to set yourself up as best as you can.
Yeah.
But just do it. Do it scared and do it now. And learn
I
along
love
the
that.
way.
Do it scared and do it now.
That
Love
Yes.
that. That's the next t-shirt.
that should be. Well, honestly, Jacqueline, that was honestly a great conversation. Again, thank you so much for agreeing to be, I guess, on our podcast. It's a great honor to have you here. Great honor, honestly, to hear your story and how you got here. And I bet you are going to inspire a lot of people.
Thank you so much. I'm smiling ear to ear right now. I wish you guys could see. I really
No,
appreciate you having me on here.
thank
This
you
was
so much, Jacqueline. We really appreciate the time. Thanks for reconnecting. This is not the last time. I'm sure we'll have you again on the podcast to hear more about your stories and you being a warrior of many different areas in this life and just having that global impact. I think is extremely beautiful. So keep shining, keep inspiring, and keep sharing that story. We very much look forward to the next time we meet again. Just to close this out, one thing I wanted to make sure we plug in for our loyal listeners now at night.com as well is just to understand for your legacy and your group that you founded, just give us a little bit more information, how we can find more about it, the context, and just a little bit more on how you've started to have that impact that we've been talking about during this podcast, Jacqueline, if you don't mind.
Sure, of course. So everyone can find me and JM Legacy Group across all my social media platforms and my website at www.jacqlenemonet.com. That is JACQLENEMONET across website, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, you name it. I'm there. Some of the services that I offer or that we offer are speaking, of course, keynote speaking, keynote speaking, workshop facilitation, hosting, moderating, voiceover work, and brand consulting. I'm doing some great brand consulting work now with other brands and organizations, which has been a nice, really fun new avenue of work and a new skill set that I enjoy. And so you can reach us also for one-on-one sessions. You want to learn some strategy or figure out strategy for the next steps in your roadmap or your journey and how to hit your goals. I'm your girl. Reach out to me and schedule a session today or book me to speak at your next event. Thank you so much.
Love to hear it. Thank you so much, Jacqueline.
You're welcome. Have a wonderful day, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
We'll see everyone in the next episode.
Bye.
Take care.